Hello photographers! Today we're going to be talking about black and white photography. This is probably being introduced to you during the beginning or in the middle of our still life unit, which usually lines up also with either manual mode or aperture priority. But either way, you should have been taking some still life photos in class. And so what I want you to do to start off with is in Photoshop, I simply want you to open up one of your many still life photos, one that you kind of like, you're feeling pretty good about this thing, okay? And then we're gonna save a copy of this. So once you have it, go to File, Save As. We are going to save this on the computer. We're gonna save it to your yearbook folder. So the yearbook. And what I would like you guys to do in your edits folder, let's create a new folder in here and let's call it Still Life Edits. Okay? And we're going to open up that folder. So now in our Still Life Edits folder, I want you to call this black and white. And click Save. Leave it set at max and click OK. So you can shoot in black and white mode, but most photographers shoot in color and then they desaturate the image. And so that's what I'm going to show you today. There's lots of different ways to do it. I'm going to show you the wrong ways to do it, and I'm going to show you the right ways to do it. All right, so the first thing I would do is with your image, if you can't view the whole thing, zoom out so you can see the whole image. You want to be able to see it nice and clear. And then we're going to do this as an adjustment layer. So I want you to open up your layers panel. We always do everything as an adjustment layer when we're making color changes and selections, just so we can make changes later. So down here at the bottom, okay, hopefully this is review, you're going to click here, and under the adjustment layer, I want to show you again, there's a couple different ways we can do it. I'm going to show you one way. I don't want you to do it this way. I just want you to watch me do it this way. So one way to do it is to go to your hue and saturation, and then when the properties box pops up, you literally can just take your saturation all the way down. Okay? The reason you don't do this is it desaturates everything as at the same exact level. It doesn't give you a lot of control. So that's one way you can do it, but we're not going to do that. Instead, I want you to go to the adjustment layers, and we're going to go to the black and white option. Now this is why this is the preferred method. I want you to move out your dialog box so you can see the image as it is, and you're going to see these changes. So it's going to do exactly what the last one did. It's going to desaturate it. So you're like, okay, it did the same thing. Why is this the better version? Because you can tweak the colors to fine tune this. So what this does is wherever the reds were, I can also change my values. So wherever I can bump that to make it a little bit darker. So, and again, it's a lot of just playing around. So I want to be clear. This is where there was no green in this image. So see how there's not much changing because there just weren't any greens. Now watch, there's blue in the cup here. Watch what happens when I start to change that. Notice how, because my blues were pretty light, I need to make them a little bit darker. What you're trying to get is you're trying to get your good contrast. There we go. Oof, now we're getting some contrast. And I probably didn't have a lot of magenta. All right, and then I'm just going to click before and after. So see how there wasn't a lot of contrast? That's why this is the preferred option. Okay, so I want you to stop the video, and I want you to apply a black and white adjustment layer. All right. Now the next thing we can do is if we've decided, okay, we are 100% sure we like this. This looks really good. We're pretty happy with it. We need to merge this. So we're going to merge this by right-clicking on this adjustment layer, and we're just going to merge down. Now this is going to permanently seal it onto that. So you want to make sure that you are 100% happy with it before you do this. And now we're still going to fine-tune. And the way we fine-tune the black and white images, now we use our tools. We use our, you guessed it, our dodge and our burn tool to still continue working with the lights and the darks, especially if you had blacks and whites, because when I did that image adjustment layer, you notice I was only changing I could only correct or make modifications to the colors. So the reds, the blues, the greens, I can make them darker or lighter. But what happens to my whites and blacks, whether it literally is reading as white and black, it's not reading as color? That's where you have to go and switch to your dodge and burn tool. So I'm going to start first and say, I need to darken some areas up. This is just so white, it's so flat. I'm going to grab my burn tool and I'm going to set it to mid-tone. So I want you to watch me do this. You can't follow along because you're using a different image, but I want you to watch it, and then when I release you, then you can practice it. Okay, so with my burn tool, remember it's going to darken up my midtones. I'm going to increase my brush size a little bit. You still always want a nice soft edge brush. And I'm going to come into my image, and now I'm just going to darken up where those midtones are. Just getting it a little bit of a pop. And I like to have my history panel out so I can see this is what it looked like before, this is what it looked like after. Notice I'm bringing those things out, okay? So I want you to stop the video, and I want you to use the burn tool to darken up. It can be the highlights. Maybe you need to darken the highlights, or you even need to darken the shadow. So I can say back in here, I want to make these shadows even a little bit punchier, okay? Last thing I will say before I release you to try that is make sure your exposure is not set crazy high. I have it set at 35%, which is actually pretty high. I would definitely not go above 35%. If you want to kind of go slow, take it down to more like, say, 10 or 15. All right, so stop the video. I want you to darken some of your values, whether it's your lights, your midtones, or your darks, and then come on back. All right, so now that you darken the areas that need to be darkened, we're going to lighten the areas that need to be lightened. I'm just going to move these out of the way so we can see. I'm going to say I want to make my lights, I want to have, these are kind of blurring in a little bit too far in the back. I need to bring out some of the value here. I need to lighten it a little bit. So we need to switch to the dodge tool. I'm going to switch to my dodge tool. I'm going to take my exposure up. That's kind of low. I'm going to go to 15%, and I want to increase the highlights. I like the dark that's back here, but I want to make my highlights a little bit more highlighty, brighter. And notice it's just making it a little bit brighter. I could also bring out my midtones if I wanted to, but I actually like where the midtones are, so I'm going to leave that there. All right, so stop the video, and I want you to use your dodge tool to lighten areas that need to be lightened. All right. Ooh. If you saw me, I'm still kind of meddling and playing. That's why 35 is really high. I'm just darkening my plate in the background so my cup in the foreground really stands out. All right, before we finish up with the sharpening tool, which is the last thing we're going to do here, if you want to, you can apply a vignette. So this is just going to be a quick review. You can either use the rectangle or the elliptical marquee tool, either way, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it as an elliptical. You always want to put a feather on here. This is a pretty large file, so I'm going to set my feather at like 200. And again, you just got to try it and see what works. I'm going to grab my oval because I want it to be, I'm going to do it around the outside. I'm going to flip that, okay? So I'm flipping it so I actually have the area around it selected. And that's where I am going to use an adjustment layer. I'm going to go to my brightness and contrast, and I'm going to take my brightness. I can see what it looked like if I'm going to make it darker, or I can even make it lighter if I wanted to. I'm going to go just a shade darker, and then again I'm like before, after. Yeah, it just adds a little bit more highlight on that. All right, so if you want to add a vignette, go ahead and add a vignette. If you haven't saved recently, I would save. I'm just going to save it right back to that folder. Notice it's converting it to a Photoshop file because I have that adjustment layer in there. I'm just clicking save. All right. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to use the sharpen tool to just clean some things up. So this has what's called a shallow depth of field. We may or may not have gotten on into depth of fields in class. If not, we will get to it very, very shortly. But depth of field means one part of the image is in focus, the other areas are soft focus. So it kind of mimics the way the human eye works. What we're going to do is click on our background layer, and we're going to sharpen what should be in focus. I'm going to zoom in on my cup, and it's pretty in focus, but I could still crisp up those edges just a little bit. So on my background layer, I am going to switch to my sharpen tool. So remember the sharpen tool does take up a lot of RAM, so that's why I saved before I did this, because it can freeze up your computer. So with your, again, your sharpen tool, I'm going to take my strength down to about 15 to 17%. And then you're just going to brush across the area that you just want to crisp up. And I like to do it as one long sweep rather than lots of little sweeps with the brush, because that does tend to freeze up the computer. And right now I can't click on anything. See, I'm trying to grab my tools. That's showing me that it's still trying to do this. That's why I said it takes a lot of RAM. But go ahead, and while we're waiting for mine to, oh, there it worked. So let me show you. So this is before. You can kind of just see it just crisps it up just the teeniest tiny bit. So go ahead, stop the video, and using your sharpening tool, I just want you to crisp up the areas that you just want to make a little bit crispier. All right, now that you're done with that, we're pretty much done. That's it. Converting things to black and white is pretty simple to do. But in order to turn this in, I want you to go to File. We're just going to save it one last time. We're going to save your sharpening in there, because now we have this nice Photoshop file. We can always go back and continue editing. I can always take that vignette off if I want to, but we're going to export this in order to turn it in. So File, Export, Export As. In the dialog box that pops up, make sure it's set as JPEG. Crank your quality all the way up to high, okay, because we want to do this to print quality. So crank that baby all the way up. And then we're going to hit Export. And we're going to put it right back into that same folder, Yearbook, Edits, Still Life Edits, and we're just going to click Save. Now, this was the original file. We're just saving over it. We're saving in our corrections. And then you need to attach this file in Google Classroom under the black and white photography lesson. All right, that's it. Next up is selective color, or sometimes called spot color. Good job, everybody.